friends. Welcome back to the Malibu Canyons and another edition of Ask MotoMan. This time I'm coming to you from a 2000, I believe it's a 16 Maxima SR, but this is a somewhat special model. It is the Maxima SR Midnight Edition. So why don't we dive into answering your questions and a bit of a second mini review of the Maxima. Okay, so let's get something straight right from the top that most of you seem to understand. This is more of an Ask MotoMan segment than it is a car review or some sort of story about a car. So if you want to see all sorts of beautiful images of this car moving from the outside or the engine or any of that kind of stuff, because some of you seem to still complain about this, there are many episodes out of this car that we shot, I think 3 to maybe 5 episodes. So go and check those out. I'll link it up here so you can hit it in the card just above. So with that, let's dive into what we got here. This is a 2016 Nissan Maxima. Actually, no, I think it's a 2017 Nissan Maxima SR. So that means this is the sport model. It has the more tuned suspension, and you cannot get a sunroof. Now, we've driven this car, and I am going to sit here and tell you that I liked the car, a year and a half ago when we drove it, and now that I've spent more time with it in California, I actually did drive it in Tennessee for about 4 or 5 days. I still like the car. Matter of fact, now that I've spent more time with this car in multiple regions, so like that was more of like greenery and different types of roads in the canyons here, and then driving it around in traffic, I am more resolute in the fact that this is a wonderful car, that Nissan put a huge effort into redefining this vehicle, but then completely dropped the ball by saddling it with this terrible transmission. Like, the stiffness of this platform, and I don't mean just the SR. The car that I drove in Tennessee, that was a Platinum edition, a Platinum, like the super duper model that had all the stuff in it and a sunroof. That was, like, I couldn't really notice the difference in the stiffness between that and this car. Yes, this has a different suspension, so you definitely feel that the platform is stiffer, but is it the suspension or is it the platform itself? Basically, the point I'm getting at here is the logic of not offering a sunroof in this platform because you want to offer the person who buys the car a stiffer car to go on a track. I don't think Nissan could count on one hand the amount of people that would take a car like this to the track. Actually, you know what? Let's call this a bonus question. If you bought this vehicle and actually track it, I would love to know where you track it, what you do with it. As a matter of fact, don't just hit me in the comments below. Hit me in the comments below and then send me a direct message on Facebook, because I may want to have you on the show and more people will want to hear from you about your driving a Maxima or really tracking a Maxima. So in summary, the two things that bothered me about this car like a year and a half ago when I argued with them with Vish, who is the product planner for this car, a great guy and a good friend. By the way, he drives a GTR. I can see them changing course and offering a sunroof in this thing. As a matter of fact, if I'm a betting man, I think the next model year you're going to see a sunroof option in the SR. Maybe we come back and we check up on this. But the transmission, I don't see that changing in any way, shape, or form. And here's why. I think that Nissan in the 2009 to about 2013 timeframe had it in their product plan to update the Maxima. Then the economy fell off a cliff, and they're like, we need to look at this product plan again and see what's imperative and what is not imperative to our business. And updating the Maxima was not imperative to their business. And as a result, it was the oldest product in the lineup for a long time. But then as the economy started to turn around and some of their prudent moves like a new Altima, a new Rogue really proved to be incredibly successful. Specifically the Altima, like that car wasn't like in the top 3 sellers in the US race for sales, but now consistently since 2013 it has been. So they had a little bit more leeway in which to go back and do a program like this. But here's the catch, and now this is me reading between the tea leaves. This is not me talking to Vish or anybody else. This is just kind of piecing together the whole story and saying, I think that Nissan North America, where most of this car was developed, that's where it was designed. They went to Nissan Global and they said, we want this much money. Well, what do you want that for? We want a new design. We want to go down to the Blue Angels and get their input on the dashboard, how it's designed, which they did. And they said, we want a transmission, a geared transmission. That's what I think the conversation really was. And then Nissan Global, whoever handles the purse strings, probably said, you know what, we agree with you. Yeah, I think it does need better sheet metal. We need to compete with the likes of like the Buick LaCrosse, the Toyota Avalon, large front-wheel drive cars like that, because the Infiniti is not doing that. But here's the catch. We're going to give you this much money, and I don't know what that was, but we're not giving you a new transmission. You have to use the transmission or the family of transmissions that's already proving to be successful in the Altima, in the Rogue, in the Pathfinder. So I think it really just came down to that, and that's why we're never going to see the transmission change in the entire product cycle of this car. Now, if the economy doesn't fall off a cliff in the next couple of years and we get to a point of cycling this car again, maybe they will do a geared transmission and all-wheel drive. But again, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly and thinking about it from a business perspective, I don't think that's going to change. Okay, so let's put aside the business of international espionage or something like that as it pertains to global car platform development and focus on two other things. Number one, what makes this Maxima SR special? And that is that this is the Midnight Edition, so there are three differentiators here. Number one, it's got the black wheels. Number two, it's got a black rear spoiler. And number three, it has a different rear diffuser. And then number two, and that is why this thing is special to me. Like, look at some of the roads we're driving on here. This is the very same roads where we did this with the Miata ND, where we shot the ND full first drive review, or Ferrari episode. We've shot AMG episodes out here. And this car, look at this. Don't try this at home. I'm putting my foot into it. Let's downshift going into this turn here, and actually denied the shift. That's why the transmission is terrible. But notice, it's not embarrassing itself. Like, I wouldn't have done this with the previous gen Maxima. Like, I would have done it with, like, remember the 89 Maxima? Like, I think it was a second gen Maxima, where it was the first four-door sports car. That one I still love. That was a lighter, smaller car with a stick and a relatively powerful V6 for the time. So much fun to toss that kind of a car around these roads. This, you kind of get a little bit of that excitement back. I know excitement's more Pontiac than Nissan, but you get my point. Which is why I'm puzzled Nissan put the effort to make a car like this go around a corner. Look at this. This well, and this composed, and saddle it with this transmission. Okay, so let's put that aside and dive into your questions. And we're going to start with Barrett Garisi. He posed a very good question on our last Ask MotoMan segment, that Miata ND. Such a good question. Many of you had a very similar question. And his question was, would I choose a new Miata ND or a used Cayman S? Now, a number of you posed a similar question, so similar it was new Miata ND or Boxster S. It was some variation of that. And the way I like to answer these questions of, hey, what car should I get? Or would you choose this or that? I always like to answer as, what would I do? And as you found out in the previous Ask MotoMan, and you probably heard me talk about in many other episodes, I am a cheapskate. I am a big Dave Ramsey fan. But even before I got into Dave Ramsey, I was a cheapskate when it came to cars, meaning I always prefer to buy a secondhand car rather than a new car. And that's because I'd love to tell you that, I studied the numbers and it always worked, but no, I made probably the biggest mistake on the first car I ever bought. I bought a 1986 Isuzu Impulse Turbo. And I loved it because it was a Jaguar design car. I thought it was so cool, but I didn't realize it was a Chevette underneath and a terrible car to drive. It had a beautiful interior. And I lost my ass in terms of resale. Like, I learned depreciation in the worst possible way. Ever since then, I don't think I've ever lost money on a car, or if I have, it's been like $1,000 to drive a car for a year and a half, something like that. So that's one thing you guys need to consider when I answer these questions. And then the other important thing is, whenever you guys ask me, hey, which car should I choose? I always turn the question around and ask you a question. It's actually 3 questions. What are you going to do with the car? Where do you live? And most importantly, how long are you going to keep it? So if you guys ever see this and you want to ask me this question, answer those 3 questions first. It makes it a lot more efficient. So let's turn that back into Barrett's question of, would I choose a used Cayman S or a new ND? The answer is neither, because I would reframe the question, and would it be a used ND, which you can get now? It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you can get a used ND, or would I get a used Cayman S? That's where it gets into the, well, what am I doing with the car and how long do I want to keep it? So let's talk about what am I doing with the car. In my case, I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. So either one would do just fine. So if we've got a bit of a push there, then that's when we got to push down to the next question, and that is, how long do I want to keep it? And that's usually where it kind of trips everyone up, because I had a guy ask me a question about a used Z4 as opposed to a new ND, and I pushed him over to the ND, and the reason why is he told me he wanted to keep the car for 10 years. And the minute you want to keep a car more than 5 years, that's when I would generally shy away from something like a BMW or Mercedes, because the minute it goes out of the warranty, you're going to have some significant costs in keeping the car on the road. So back to Barrett's question, Porsche, that's a bit of a different scenario. Shockingly, they actually have very good A, resale, and B, reliability. Now, will that change going forward as we're going to see, like with the new Panamera, that kind of stuff? I don't know. But I've got a number of friends that run old Boxsters, old Caymans, and they've proven to be significantly reliable, almost as reliable as some Japanese cars. The only push is, well, you're going to pay a lot more for parts. So if you're okay with that, then I would do the Cayman S. But if you want dead reliability, you want the car to start every time, never leave you on the side of the road, and not turn up and get like, this part here is going to cost you $2,000, then you got to go with the Mazda. So in summary here to Barrett, number 1, hopefully that answers your question. Number 2, and much more importantly, I wanted to go through that so you guys understand how I arrived at the answer rather than just the answer itself, because it's not really about an ND Miata versus a used Porsche. It's more about the approach in acquiring a vehicle as well as thinking down the road of, what is it going to cost me to operate that vehicle, and realistically, how long am I going to operate that vehicle? So with that, let's press on to the next question. And this one comes from a relatively new viewer to the show, but one that is a frequent flyer in my Periscopes as well as my recent Facebook Lives. And if you're not joining me there, make sure you do. MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word. This question comes from Suhail El Ali. Suhail El Ali, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing that, and if I do, my apologies. Suhail comes in from Saudi Arabia and is a major car guy. Now, Suhail originally posed this question in our last Facebook Live, but I felt it important enough where I wanted to move the conversation here to really expand it. And on its face, his question is very simple. It's, can Chrysler make a 300 competitive with the CT6? Now, the short answer is no. But really, there is a long answer here, and we need to break it into 2 parts. There's the car itself, and then there is the management of FCA. So let's start with the easy part, the car itself. It came out, 2005 model year. It's been around, 11, 12 model years now. And it was a sensation when the car first came out. I mean, it was Ralph Gilles' baby. And actually, behind the scenes, which you didn't know, Freeman Thomas, who's now at Ford, does all the advanced design at Ford, he was one of the people that worked on it and really came up with the idea of the proportions. And it was Ralph's sketch that became the 300. So really great backstory there. And the car was built on a fantastic platform at the time, because remember, it was Daimler Chrysler. So it was built on the then E-Class. So what is that, 2 E-Class generations ago. So yeah, it could be competitive today, but not as competitive with a car like a CT6 or even a new E-Class. But Suhail, he brings up his question as really as it pertains to length. And I would argue it's not a length thing. The CT6 yet has a long wheelbase and it's closer to 7 Series in wheelbase. But even if you were to add length to the wheelbase of a Chrysler 300, that does not a competitive car make. So let's put all that aside. Now let's get into really the heart of the matter, and that is the management, or I would argue the mismanagement of FCA. I don't know what it is about Chrysler. And just kind of a disclaimer here, if you've been watching the show for a while, you know I am a huge fan of the people who design, engineer, and build Chrysler products. I would argue that the brain trust inside of Chrysler is equally competitive, if not better, than some of the other manufacturers around the world. Forget about Detroit. Obviously, we've talked about Ralph. I'm very biased because he's a personal friend of mine. But then you look at guys like Dick Winkles. He was the chief powertrain engineer for every Viper since there was a Viper. And I just found out like a couple weeks ago that when BMW contracted with Chrysler for the first mini engine, it was Dick Winkles that designed it. So it's amazing the brain trust that other car companies have come to them, and they've come up with great solutions. But it's the utter mismanagement of this company. Like, put aside Bob Lutz and Lee Iacocca, virtually every other management team that's been in there has mismanaged this company into the ground, even with great assets like the people, or vehicles, or brands like Jeep. It astounds me. Then a guy like Marchione comes around. And I'll admit, when the whole deal first happened, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit back, see what this guy can do, because he seems to have a good balance of a finance background as well as product. I was wrong. Look at some of the things this man has done in the mismanagement of FCA. Obviously, the most recent and just most maddening to me is, why on God's green earth would you sell Ferrari? That is clearly a very short-term, profit-taking, private equity view of the world. To sell an asset you will never be able to buy back, an asset that really adds so much to the overall empire of FCA, that now you've called that asset into question. Then there's the whole Chrysler 200, which I call a Me Too car. And you could sit here and argue, well, you know, the people you love, MotoMan, they're the ones that design and build. No. They did what management told them to do. And you look at the Chrysler 200, the management said, we want a car that looks like an Altima or a Camry or really a Ford Fusion, because that was the leader at the time. And now they could say, yeah, me too. Well, we want a car that we can put a 4-cylinder and a V6 and can go all-wheel drive. Well, guess what? Now, yeah, me too. Okay, so rather than beat this horse into the ground, you get where I'm going with this whole Me Too thing? And then when the car flopped, shockingly, the guy gets out there publicly and bashes his people who built the car. I'm like, are you serious? You are the biggest jackass going. These people were building better cars before you came along, and you're the one who told them to do it. But now here's the rub. Think about that management logic. And there are many other examples like, oh, we're going to focus on big trucks and Jeeps as our future. We're not going to compete in the mid-size car market. And I'm like, well, don't you know that oil prices are cyclical and they could go back up? And look what happened in 2008 when oil prices went up. It boggles the mind. But enough of the mismanagement of FCA. I could go on and on and on about that topic, obviously, as you can tell. Let's look at what real management is. The CT6, as Suhail brings up. Now, there are many things that I could go on about this car. But there are really two things that I want to point out that demonstrate the ethos of real management. Number one, the hood line. Now, I could sit here, and again, a personal friend of mine, Bob Boniface, you guys know, you guys love him, and you could say Bob and his team, they drew a line and said, we want that line. It's not that simple. He had to go argue with Travis Hester, which he did, and you guys have met Travis Hester, great guy. Highly suggest you go back and see those episodes. To lower the hood line, it is a visual trick that you look at that car and you don't see it until you see the car in person. To lower the hood line, we're not talking about just a designer saying, I want that, or an engineer agreeing to it. It's millions. I would argue at least tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, in development and R&D, as well as a shit ton of time to make that hood line that low. And look at, it's not just the hood line, it's the hood line, and look at the height of the wheels and tires in that car. Incredibly hard to do. So that's one example. But it's really the second example which is even more graphic, and that's all the light weighting. So think of a car like this, where all the load bearing comes together, like the A-pillar, the structure of all this, and with a subframe, basically, where all the suspension and engine meet. That's here, here, and then even in the back as well in the corners. So in a car like this, in the front, what is it? It's probably like 40 to 60 parts. In the back, it's probably 40 parts. In the CT6, it's one casting, one on each corner. Now again, huge amounts of R&D to make that a reality. They even had to go and invent ways to bond, actually not bond, but rivet aluminum and steel together. And then a couple of other learning they had to go through. Long and short of the story, it wasn't just, oh, we're going to make a new car. It's, we got to figure out a new way to build a car to make the car we want. So the point is, they weren't engineering a Cadillac to a price, much like the XTS was. Instead, what they were doing was engineering a car to a standard, which is what Mercedes has been doing since the beginning of Mercedes. And one could argue that, like in the early 2000s, maybe late 1990s, they didn't quite keep that tradition up, but now they're back. Now, the CT6, I bring you this example because A, you could go look at the full first drive review and see what I'm talking about, because we literally see the car naked and Travis explains the whole thing. I encourage you to go look at it. And B, while the Cadillac is the most extreme example and will be a blueprint for GM cars coming down the road, there are other car manufacturers that are doing this kind of stuff, like Mazda. You look at any Mazda, we've talked about Skyactiv stuff for a couple of years now. I've had Dave Coleman come on God knows how many times, it rattles off for 20 minutes about engineering and all this kind of stuff, and you guys love that. But that's basically, I bring up the Mazda example because that's not a $90,000 Cadillac, you get it? And as a basis of comparison, Toyota, what do they sell? 400,000 Camrys a year. Mazda is lucky to sell almost 100,000 Sixes a year, yet they put better engineering in their cars. So if at the end of the day, FCA management decided to release the hounds of their amazing brain trust, and they were able to work out all the issues of this coming Giulia platform, which I believe the 300 is going to be based upon, it's, in theory, it could happen. But in reality, considering all of the just, I would say incredible, but really ridiculous management blunders of FCA over the past couple of years, I just don't see it happening. So really what I need to do is reframe Sohail's question. It's not so much, can Chrysler make a current or future competitive 300? It's really, can FCA avoid liquidation? Because in reality, if they continue with the way they're managing their business, the company is going to, it's not going to be bought by somebody else, it's going to be liquidated, and then other companies would like pick out the pieces of value like Jeep and make them part of their empires rather than try to resurrect FCA as a whole. Sad to say, but that's really the direction that management is taking this company. Okay, on that cheery topic, let's press on to the next question. And this comes from a guy with a very interesting name. I don't know if it's his real name or if it's Twitter handle. Either way, it's a cool name. James Bond. Can't forget that one. James proposed a very good question via Twitter. And it is, he drives 160 miles a day round trip. Vaya con Dios, man. And he wants to know what car for $120,000 or less would I suggest for commuting. Seriously, for 120 grand, I would suggest buy a condo near work or just move. I wouldn't commute 160 miles round trip. It's just the quality of life would be terrible. But this is coming from a guy who used to commute in and out of New York City every day, so I can completely appreciate how soul-crushing a long commute can be. But that is not your question, so let's unpack your question. Now, as I said, I like to answer these as if what I would do. and you brought up a budget of 120 grand. And very simple, I wouldn't put 120 grand on the road, because literally what you're doing is you're taking a $120,000 asset and you are driving it to zero within like a year at 160 miles a day. It's just, it's not palatable from a financial point of view. And yes, you brought up you want a rear drive car, which I would want to, no matter where I would live. You brought up some good examples, like a 5 Series diesel, that kind of stuff. What I would be doing is not so much changing the car, but I would change the approach in which I was acquiring the car. So the approach would be, oh, I'm not going to buy a $120,000 asset and drive it to zero. What I would be doing is saying, you know what, I'm going to switch a car every 2 years. I'm going to buy a used car that I like, that has 50 or maybe 60,000 miles, still has some warranty on it, and I'm going to drive it to, I'll make it up, 100,000 miles. Or I'm going to drive it to 120,000 miles. And the logic is, you're letting somebody else pay the depreciation, the main depreciation. And you're going to beat the hell out of depreciation, but not so much, because you're only going to drive it down from 50,000 miles to about 100,000 miles. So you're probably going to lose about half your money. That's my guess, about it, depending on the car. You can lose about half your money, much cheaper than putting $120,000 on the road and losing 85 to say 100,000 of it. You get my point here? And there are many cars you can do this with. Like, you can buy a BMW diesel, you can buy a Mercedes. Me, I would probably do like a Lexus. I would probably do like a Cadillac, something with not as many frills, because the more miles you put on the car, no matter what region of the world you're in, you're going to beat the crap out of it, you're going to have more problems. So I'd want to look for something that has very strong reliability, which would mean it's not going to be as exciting. And this, I understand this is I've given you a very financial answer, but there are some fun choices here. You can still do your BMW diesel. There's like, a Lexus GS, a used one would be a good choice. A Lexus IS would be a great choice to use. Probably I would suggest even that. But the point is, I want you to mitigate. Holy f***ing shit. Okay, so I'm doing an Ask MotoMan here, and there is a guy in a Nissan Sentra. I'm going to show this to you guys here. I'm taking the camera off. There's a guy in a Nissan Sentra. This road is a one-way road here, and he literally came out of the turn. He came obviously too fast, lost control, and somehow literally on his head. Or, you know the old joke, are they going to end up right side up, or is the car going to end up shiny side up? In this case, shiny side down. That's not how you want to end the day. Is this your car?
It's a rental car.
No, but is this, you were driving it?
My friend, the guy who rented it is going down to call.
Okay, so you guys are out and you're okay.
Oh yeah, we're okay.
Okay, guys, let's take a look at this. Okay, you guys with me here? Okay. You guys, where are you in from?
I'm from Spain.
Where in Spain?
Madrid.
Great, cool. Great city.
Do you blog?
I've been to Madrid many times.
Oh, yeah.
I was just in Malaga, but like a month ago.
Yeah, the south is beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, what do we got here? Holy shit, man.
Yeah, we just.
Okay, guys. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Tires are super flat. They're just iced.
Yeah, you can see the banding here.
Yeah.
They definitely need to be replaced. You probably were going a bit too fast.
Yeah.
I would argue you're going too fast on this car.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely are. Okay.
It was a,
Wow. So you guys are okay? You're not hurt?
oh yeah, no. The flip was super slow. It was like slow motion.
What did you hit there and it flipped?
Yeah, we just.
Brakes right here.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see here. The skid marks are here, down here, and you literally went into the wall of dirt, into the tree, and then back down. Wow. Okay, so we're back here. This is a little bit unexpected. I was going to ask you guys some questions to end this episode. Rather, he just opened the trunk. Gravity. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I mean, everybody's safe. It's all I care about. Everybody's safe, but you can kind of see what happened here, and this happens in the California Republic. So, James, in summary to your question, change your approach to acquiring vehicles if you continue to commute 160 miles each day. I would plan on changing cars at least every 2 years, maybe less, so you can limit the depreciation. I would argue find a car with very low miles for the year and then sell it when it's at normal miles, and you could limit your overall exposure financially. This works for a couple of friends of mine, so I'm telling you this from experience. If you want any more insight on that, feel free to hit me on Facebook Messenger and I will give you more details. But that is my general approach. Please don't put $120,000 on the road. You know, maybe you take $20,000 budget for the commuter car and then take the $100,000 for a fun car you don't put a lot of miles on and have fun with that car. Anyway, there was another question I was going to answer, but our visitors from Madrid, I think they need more of my help than me answering your questions. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. Number one, if you want your questions answered here, hopefully we will not have a flip over accident. But if you want your questions answered, please get them into me. We're going to do this on a more regular basis, as you are now seeing. Hashtag AskMotoManTV, hashtag AskMotoManTV. And then number two, I want to leave you guys with a question here. So here we are at the scene. We've got you can see where the skid marks were here. These guys were coming down the hill a bit too fast here. And if you guys saw our episode with the Cadillac CTS-V way back in 2010 when I was a much larger man and I was racing a skateboarder, that's where we ended it. So you can get an idea of how dangerous this road can be. So they're coming around, they don't know the road very well, a little bit too much speed, and they hit the tree over there, the wall of dirt, and then the car literally bounced onto the shiny side. So my question to you is, was this speed or something else? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I'm going to leave you with two things. Number one, make sure you download our fancy new mobile application, which you can download for free, and it is updated from Apple iTunes and Google Play. And number two, there's the fun fact. There's the black wheels for you. So I wasn't going to show you the outside of the car that much, but here, you're actually going to see the outside of the car now because the roadway is blocked. And there's the diffuser. There's a diffuser. Okay, yeah, so until I see you next time, I will say bis später, or in this case, hasta luego.